Hey, I'm Brian and this is the Sony A6300, the camera that I've been using for my last few YouTube videos. It's very small and has tons of features, so can it really be the most versatile YouTube camera? So let's start with the general things. The A6300 is a very small camera, but it still comes with a flash and a viewfinder. I don't see myself using that a lot though, so I removed the hood from it to make the camera even more compact. On the side of the camera you'll find a micro USB port that you can use for charging, so you can even juice up the camera on the go with a portable battery bank, for example. There's also an HDMI port that supports up to 4K output, so you could technically hook up the camera to an external recorder and record 4K that way. But because it has internal 4K recording, I don't see a lot of people using that. Lastly, there's also a mic input on the side that you can use for an external microphone, and I can just really recommend you to not cheap out on the Sony A6000 because that one doesn't have a mic input, which makes it pretty much useless for recording audio. On the top of the camera is the mode dial that has lots of options and even programmable functions. But I really only see myself using the P mode, which is basically auto, but with you being able to change things, the manual mode, and panorama. The camera does have a dedicated video recording button, so you can record in all of the modes, so I'd really recommend you to record in P or M mode, because that gives you more options than the normal video recording mode. With all of the dials on the camera, it's really easy to change all of the main things on the fly. But a lot of other things are really hidden inside the menus, and the menu system is not the best one. Focus peaking is, for example, really hard to find, especially in other languages than English. What is even worse for navigation is that the A6300 doesn't have a touchscreen. The display is pretty good, but it's also pretty small and it doesn't rotate, so you can't see yourself while filming. Now I don't think that that's a big issue because I use an external monitor, because that's better than the built-in one anyway, but it is an extra investment that you have to think about. Now on the opposite side of the display is arguably the most important thing in the camera, the sensor. The A6300 features a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor, though that does make raw images pretty big at up to 25 megabytes. The sensor doesn't have optical image stabilization though, which is one of the two important differences to the A6500 along with the lack of a touchscreen. Though I don't really think that these two small upgrades are worth double the price for the A6500. Now stills from the A6300 look pretty good, though I'm by no means a professional photographer, I'm more of a casual guy when it comes to that, but it's definitely usable for thumbnails. This is also because of the really fast autofocus. Seriously, the autofocus on this camera is amazing. And it also works great while recording video, which brings us to that part of the camera which you're probably most interested in anyways. The camera takes the full 6K image from the 24 megapixel sensor and scales that down to record 4K internally. Now the 4K of this camera is thus really sharp and looks really good. It records 4K at up to 30 FPS, though you should really use 24, and what I don't like is that it doesn't shoot 1080p at 24 FPS. It's always nice if your camera natively supports what you use in your timeline. But it makes up for that with up to 120 FPS recording at 1080p, so you can slow down the footage up to 5 times and get really smooth handheld B-roll. So it's really easy to get Peter McKinnon style B-roll with this camera. And of course, for recording smooth B-roll you need a lens with optical image stabilization because the camera doesn't have internal stabilization. And that's where the kit lens comes in. Yes, I would really recommend you to buy the kit because it's usually a lot cheaper on sale than the standalone body, and the kit lens can really come in handy. It's not the best piece of glass with a variable aperture of 3.5 to 5.6, but it's really small, and with kit lens on the camera I can even put it in my jacket pocket, which makes me take it more. And even in this compact package for not a lot of money you get optical image stabilization, fast and silent autofocus, and also a 16 to 50mm zoom range, which is good in a lot of occasions. It's a good all-round lens, but of course a better piece of glass does lead to better results. I also have a 35mm f1.7 lens that is super cheap, under $100, but an amazing value because it lets in lots of light and has great bokeh. A 50mm equivalent is great for shooting B-roll in general, and it's also not really an issue that it doesn't have optical image stabilization or autofocus because I keep it on a tripod most of the time anyway. But still, a Sigma 18-35 f1.8 will be a planned but future investment. There's even a native version for Sony's E-mount, and the lens selection for this mount is pretty great in general. What is also pretty good is battery life. I can shoot A-roll and B-roll with one battery each, so it's not really an issue for me, though you will need multiple batteries, even though it's not as bad as with the A7 series. Now what is an issue on such a small camera is overheating. It's again not as bad as on other Sony cameras like the RX100, but after about 30 minutes to 1 hour of 4K recording, you will need to let the camera cool down. So it's really not an issue for me, but it can be an issue if you want to live stream with the camera, for example. Now with all of the stuff out of the way, which are the main other options on the market? The main competitors to the A6300 are the Panasonic G7 and the Canon 80D, with the G7 being a little cheaper and the 80D being a little more expensive. Now the Panasonic G7 has a smaller micro four thirds sensor, which the lens selection is quite good for, but it doesn't record 120 FPS slow motion, and it also has less light sensitivity and not as great bokeh. So I'd really recommend you to pick up the A6300 for $200 more, because it gets you a lot of more features in a smaller body, if you don't desperately need that flip out screen. The Canon 80D has the same size sensor as the A6300, a little smaller actually, but that's negligible. So bokeh and light sensitivity should generally be the same, but it neither records 4K nor 1080p at 120 FPS. So you really have to decide whether you want Canon's color science and a flip out screen, or more recording modes in a smaller body. I settled for the latter because I don't think color grading is that much work, and it's actually pretty easy with adjustment layers. And that's really the thing in general. You have to see what you use a camera for. Do you want to make quick vlogs with a flip out screen and great color science out of the box? Then this camera is not for you. But I'm mostly behind the camera, and when I'm not, it's on a tripod or operated by someone else. So the A6300 is really perfect for me, and if you have a similar use case, I really recommend this camera. It's a great all-rounder for YouTube, it produces great footage in a small body, and it's really versatile, so you can take it anywhere. And all of that under $1,000. But that basically wraps up this video. You know which buttons to press, don't forget to press that follow button on Twitter, and stick around for a full rundown of all of the gear I use to make my YouTube videos. I'm Brian, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.